Now, the spouse of Indonesian diplomats have their own stories and experiences working and living overseas countries, both the happiest and sometimes scary, probably. Joining us at the studio, Ibu Mira and Ibu Lona to share their stories with us on this fresh morning. Good morning, Ibu Mira, Ibu Lona.
Good morning.
Good
Welcome
morning.
to Starting Point.
Thank you.
Just now, Eda has said that there are happiest
Yes.
but there are also scary tales probably. I mean, like this is probably something that people would not expect. Like people would expect the life of a diplomat is always, oh, you know, sugar and rainbows, and it's nice to be traveling all over the world. Perhaps before we go more into that, perhaps Ibu Mira can tell us a bit about your background and, well, the life of your life as a wife of a diplomat so far.
Right, yeah. Well, now, currently, we're actually on a posting, but at the same time, I'm now here in Jakarta to be with my son because he's graduating from high school. But we are on a posting in Mumbai, in India.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
Have you been there, Eda?
Not that yet.
Me
How
neither.
about you?
Okay, no, no.
Yeah, so it's very fascinating. But before that, we were, our first posting is actually in Pyongyang, in North Korea.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
So, yeah, which is, yeah, up until now is still a socialist country, yeah? Probably the only communist country in the world now. But it was in 2001 and it was fascinating for me to go because I was working as a journalist as well.
Oh, wow.
And
Fellow
so it
journalist.
was, yeah, it was, for me it was very interesting going there. And the second posting was Singapore. The next one was Canberra in Australia.
Okay.
And then we went to Tokyo, and now we're in Mumbai.
Wow. Okay. Louisa have been in Tokyo living there for a moment.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
lived there for 1 year, and I can somewhat experience, like, for that 1 year living in a country overseas where I don't speak the language, that is pretty challenging for myself. So I
Yes.
cannot imagine being you. I mean, like, you traveled across all this, across the world,
Yes.
and not having to speak the language in some of these countries, that must be very challenging.
It is.
Yeah,
I think for me, of course, it was challenging. Wherever we are, it's always a challenge, but it's also beautiful to be able to connect with the local people. But we do what we can, and we,
Okay.
you know, if we have to use Tarzan language, we do.
Body language.
Body
Tarzan.
language, exactly.
Well, thankfully now we have Google Translate
Yes.
to help, obviously.
That really helped in Japan, especially
Yeah.
because lots of the writings is all in katakana or
Yeah.
Hiragana.
Hiragana.
So now with the Google Translate, everything is easy. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. From Ibu Mira, we move on to Ibu Lona. How about Ibu Lona? Can you introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Lona Hutapea Tanasale, and like Ibu Mira said, also it is very challenging, but at the same time very interesting. And I can say that up to this moment, I have enjoyed it very much and never regret a single moment of it. And my husband was first posted also in Japan, in Osaka, not in Tokyo, but in Osaka. And then second posting was in Paris, France.
Okay.
And the third one was in Italy. We in Rome. We came back like 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, just before pandemic started.
Perhaps you can share with us, for every posting, how many years do you get to live in a
Okay.
country? And what are the struggles in general besides language?
Okay,
Yes.
so usually it ranges from 3.5 years or three years for the first posting to 4 years. In Osaka, we were there for 3.5 years. In Paris, 4 years. And then in Rome, the rule was changed a bit, so it was also 3.5 years.
Okay.
And of course, each post has its own perks, its own different challenges. In Japan, I felt that it was quite smooth actually, because Japanese people are Asians like us, so everybody was so kind, was so helpful. There was no challenge really.
Culturally.
Yeah, culturally and also like in daily life also.
Yes.
It was quite smooth for me, like driving in a highway. But then when we moved to Paris, that was when I first experienced the so-called, how do you say, culture shock.
Okay.
Culture shock, because of course, French people are very different
Yeah.
to us and Japanese people, the Europeans in general maybe. But
How different, if you can share with us? I mean,
yeah,
like,
the culture is very different. The way they communicate, the way they actually it's their typical culture, the way they communicate with people different from us. So a very, how can I say, like cynical sometimes, we think cynical, but it's just their way of talking, their way of, you know, communicating.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, so it was, I felt like like walking through climbing a mountain. Yeah, compared to Japan, like driving
Small
in a
steps,
highway.
yeah.
Yeah, it was quite challenging in Paris for me.
Okay.
But then actually with Ibu Mira, finally we were able to write a book. It was based on my struggle in France, and it forced me to, you know, like had a cathartic release, and I wrote, and finally one thing leads to another, and then we finally wrote a book together with
Okay.
Ibu Mira also.
Maybe
Yes.
could you share us a bit about the book?
Yeah, I
since
mean,
you've
I
mentioned it?
brought the book. It's in my bag.
the book
but,
also.
We'll show it
it's in
later
my
on.
bag. And,
So in my bag, I forgot.
yeah.
That's okay. We'll be taking it on the next segment. It's called Di Balik Gerbang, is it?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
We'll
yeah.
be talking about that later on. Now, for a quick follow-up question, Ibu Lona, Ibu Mira, if you can pick one country that you want to go back to and why? Just a quick follow-up question. How about Ibu Mira?
I would like to go to all of them because
Okay.
to me, each country is special.
Yes.
So for example, if you go, when they heard, oh, you're going to Pyongyang, what's in Pyongyang is very dangerous, etc.
Yeah.
But for me, it was fascinating. It was learning about, you know, how people live there, their struggles, their difficulties. But on the other hand, the beautiful part of that is that the expatriate community is very close, is very close, and we know everybody. We learn from each other. It's like a diplomatic enclave neighborhood, where there's a lot of stories to be told, of course, but it's not bad after all.
Okay.
And because of that closeness, you feel very, you know, it's like a very big family. In Singapore, on the other hand, because there are so many people, you know, you are a little bit detached from each other because
It's
of,
not
you know,
as intimate.
it's not as intimate, you know, so each country has its own, as Lona told us, perks and, you know, ups and downs, for example.
Can we just go a little bit deeper on Pyongyang here?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure like nobody's been to Pyongyang in this room. How is life in Pyongyang?
Well, life in Pyongyang, to me,
As
I
a
always look at
communist
the good
country,
side.
yeah.
Yes, it is a communist country. You cannot really go everywhere, just, you know, wherever you want to go. Of course, it's restricted. If you want to go outside of the city, you need to be chaperoned by the government.
Okay.
And but it's still very fascinating to me because, you know, you get to see the border, you know, where you have the Panmunjom, you know, the Panmunjom border. And you can see it actually from, you know, from the North Korean side.
Okay.
And then, you know, and you can wave to you know, the people in the south, for
The south,
example.
okay.
So that's fascinating. That's fascinating. And the great part of it is that I went to Korea as well, the south. So I went to both sides. So I went to Panmunjom, the same border, but I went from the south. So that was really something to me. It was like
The
full circle.
DMZ, right? The militarized zone.
Demilitarized zone. So that was full circle to me. For our shopping, this is where it, you know, because they don't have lots of, you know, where to do groceries.
Yeah.
Of course, they do have things that we can buy, but not as, you know, as much as we have here.
Okay.
So
It's limited,
we
yeah.
go to Beijing, which is only a 45-minute
Really?
plane. Yeah.
Wow.
All the way.
away, yeah. And Beijing at that time, 2001 to 2003, was amazing, was fascinating. So we got both cultures as well, because everybody went up to Beijing for their shopping, and that's what we did as well. So yeah, that was not a problem at all. But one thing in the book that I shared
We have it
is,
right here now.
Yes.
Ta-da!
Di Balik Gerbang. Okay.
Okay.
See here.
one thing in the book that I shared is about when our president, Megawati, when she was president, she visited Pyongyang. And she was the first president of Indonesia to visit that country
Right.
because of their close relations. Because Bung Karno
Okay.
was a very good friend of Kim Il Sung, Kim Jong Il's father. At the time, he was in power.
Okay.
So she visited, and for us that was super important and super big
Of
because
course.
you know who would have thought that a
Yeah.
president would come to Pyongyang out of all places, and I was very lucky and
a good
fortunate to
timing,
be
yes.
at the right time. But the struggle was, of course, the shopping. You know,
Yeah.
for to do the groceries for
Yeah.
because we needed to prepare. You know,
It's there in the book.
food, everything is in the book. Yeah.
Okay.
So if people want to read about
What
it,
about communication-wise? Are you allowed to have a phone while you were there?
unfortunately not.
At all?
At that time,
This is
2001 to
2001, yeah.
2003, there,
2001.
there wasn't any.
We didn't really.
But they did have internet at the World Food Program. It's a UN body which is
Okay.
there, so we could. It's like a in
So
our
you can
time.
visit and
Yeah, it was called like an internet cafe. So that was at the UN body. That's the only source that we
WFP.
could go to. But nowadays they do have. I think they do have phones nowadays.
Limited access, probably.
Probably.
Yeah, so if you want to have a detox, phone detox, go to Pyongyang.
Pyongyang. Yes.
It's
2001.
already more than 20 years ago. Yeah, the Mira.
It is,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
Time
That's a
flies.
long time. Yeah,
Flies.
that was the first posting.
Thank you for sharing that. In one talks, we get the whole history of Pyongyang and the experience, and also the important names. Now, Ibu Lona, you mentioned about the book Di Balik Gerbang. Now, what can you share to us in this simple book, in this with your simple words, Ibu Lona? What have you written here?
Actually, it's the mixture of experiences from diplomatic spouses.
Seven,
Actually,
yeah?
Seven.
wives of
There were
diplomats,
7 of
yes.
us.
Okay.
And sadly, one of us had passed away like 2 years ago, maybe around 2 years ago. Yeah.
Okay.
And now there are 6 of us. And actually, first I did write 2 books about life in Paris. You know, the daily life apart from the touristic side and all.
Okay.
And then after that, I thought that the lives of diplomatic family actually must be so colorful. And apart from me, there are so many stories waiting to be revealed. And then I tried to ask some friends to join. Let's write together because we each must have amazing stories.
Yeah.
And then finally, it was 7 of us, and I tried to combine to invite friends from different different batches
Okay.
and different continents where they were posted, their husbands, and so it was I can say quite complete mixture of experiences, the scary one or the special one like Ibu Mira, and also there was one of our friends
Syria.
wrote about Syria when the war just started to begin.
Okay.
Yeah, and how she felt the night of bombs and those things, and then also stories like when we had to represent Indonesia, to share Indonesian culture, things about Indonesia. Like one of our friends, also Ibu Ella, she wrote about how she taught Bahasa Indonesia in Madrid, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that is
In Madrid,
interesting.
yeah, for the students that would come to Indonesia at that time, and because there was no Indonesian courses there, she formed an Indonesian class that is called now BIPA, Bahasa Indonesia for untuk penutur asing. Yeah, and then
wow.
of course there are many stories. Like for example, also one of our friends, Ibu Andis, she told us about her experience because her husband was an ambassador in Ottawa at that time, and she shared about the experience of the what is it called, the credential. Yeah, when he received the credentials, because it's not something that everyone experienced. So I think it must be very interesting. And also Ibu Shiva, for example, she wrote about how difficult it is to find schools for children. So it can be very challenging.
It before
can
you
be very
go? Would it be assigned the school?
No.
You
Actually,
have to
when
choose
you
yourself,
when you get there, then you have some alternatives, and then you choose according to your condition.
I can imagine this must be really tough for mothers. I mean, like, on one hand, you need to move your entire family from countries to countries, but you also need to make sure that they will also be comfortable and like
Exactly.
Yes.
the transition, it must be tough. I just want to dive in, like, how is it as a mother to go through this? I mean, like, moving your family from one country to another country, how is it like?
Very challenging, very challenging, because you have to, well, first of all, we have many different roles that we play. First of all, we are a spouse of a diplomat. So
Yes.
we have to go to functions, you have to present yourself the best way you can, representing your
Representing your
country.
country.
So you have to, you have to be able to do your hair, your makeup, wear the
Wear the
kabaya.
traditional
And then
outfit.
you, once you're there, we have to look for the best schools that you want for the children.
Yes.
And of course, it is challenging. Usually we go to the schools that other children are going. Mostly, most of the time it's like that. But sometimes you have, your own way you want to explore, and that's what you do. Eventually, you'll get there in a year, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
In a year,
Or less.
you'll settle. You're quite settled.
In a year, okay.
In about a year, for
Wow,
me.
okay.
Maybe it's earlier for some
Yes.
moms. I
Okay.
don't know. It really depends on
Okay.
how you go about, and looking for the best groceries, where to find Indonesian, our spices, etc. So that is all. Doctors to go to, schools, doctors,
The schedules of
groceries,
transportation,
yeah.
like the garbage and all.
That's right.
even,
Yeah,
right?
even in Japan.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
while we were in Tokyo, she was in Osaka.
Yeah, I also
it
wrote-
was
wrote
a
about
lesson
it.
for us to learn how to.
Not recycling, but the
Yeah.
categorization.
Yeah,
of-
so you have to really think about in which bin does this belong to, because and there are many different days where you can only
Yes.
get rid of some sort of
Yes, it's
trash.
very
right?
complicated.
It is complicated. There is even like a map about it,
Yeah.
where to throw away things. So, yeah, everything is a culture shock. But you get used to it, and I actually look forward to it sometimes. Okay, time is going up. 3 years are coming. Where are we
Yeah.
going next?
It's
Okay.
exciting.
So
Okay.
bring it on.
Bring it
You can
on.
imagine, like, as the wife of a diplomat, you need to have that sense of adventure,
Yeah.
like,
That's
if you don't
right,
like
yeah.
traveling, if you don't like
Yes.
moving
Yeah.
every
Correct.
Or
3 years
meeting
for
new people,
how do you
Yeah.
cope
meeting
with
new
all
friends.
this? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
And if I may add about the
Sure.
children, actually, I always think that the real diplomats are the children. Because, of course, we know that, for example, in our cases, their fathers are the diplomats. And also, as mothers, as wives, we also have our share in contributing to Indonesian diplomacy abroad.
Yes.
But for me, it's actually the children that really, like, they have to go directly into the society,
Yeah.
go to
You have to go
school
to
with local
school,
people,
meeting new
speaking
friends,
local
new
languages.
language, yes.
We can still meet our Indonesian friends, and of course, in the embassy or the consul general, their fathers can still speak Bahasa Indonesia with their
Yes.
colleagues. But the
That's right.
children, they are the ones that really, go
That is a
straight into the
really
world,
good point.
Yes.
the
Yes.
strange world. Yes.
Yeah.
But by the way, we haven't even talked about the husbands.
Yes, not yet.
I
That
mean,
is just the intro to the kids, not yet the husbands. Okay.
yeah, but how are you? What is your role as a wife of a diplomat? How have you supported your husband throughout his job desk in other countries?
I think Indonesian spouses, spouses of Indonesian diplomats, are doing a whole lot.
Yes.
A whole lot. We support the mission. So before we even go, we are supposed.
Did you have
Like
any training
orientation,
prior
An
to
yes.
this?
orientation. There is
Yeah,
an
yeah, yeah.
orientation,
Orientation.
where we are told, what your role is. So therefore, once we are there, we are ready to promote Indonesia in terms of the clothing that we wear, our cooking, wherever there is a platform in a country. So, for example, if there is a women's international club,
UN Women's
or
Guild, for
UN,
example.
that's right.
Or Asian Women's.
Yeah. Or an international bazaar. There's an international bazaar. So that's where we go and, get our flag out there, our Indonesian flag.
Wonderful
Which
Indonesia.
is
Wonderful Indonesia.
and which is actually a lot of work as well, because you still have to, take care of the children.
Yeah.
You need to go represent, go to functions,
Cook,
like
you prepare the
receptions.
foods for the bazaar.
Exactly.
For example.
And the
Also.
most challenging for me is when there is a president coming.
Okay, and why is
when
that?
when there's the president coming, well, first you need to look,
Yeah.
ready, representative, but then you need to cook as well, because we need to prepare
Indonesian food for the
always.
delegation.
Is this a regular thing?
This is a
You
regular
will
thing.
always need to cook.
We will need to cook,
Oh, wow.
so you better,
That is the one trace that we
brush
should
up
know.
on your cooking skills. But
Okay.
the reason for that is that not every country has Indonesian cooking, and not every country has Indonesians who are able to cook, correctly.
I was
for
going to say,
example.
I don't think I will pass as a wife of a diplomat because I don't cook.
So like after cooking, bringing the pans, the pots like that,
Yeah.
wearing kebaya
Kebaya.
and kain, and then driving the food to the venue, things like that.
Wow.
We do a lot, yeah.
Actually, there's a term for it for our case. For Indonesia, it is called total diplomacy. So
Total
like Ibu Mira
diplomacy.
said, various roles as a wife, as a member of the society, also as a person, as an individual. Of course, you have to still have self-development and all. It is also
But
in
also as a
orientation.
mother.
As
yeah?
a mother, of course.
As
As a
a mother,
mother, of
not
course,
to our
yes.
children, but to the Indonesian community
Yes.
who is
Yes.
in that country.
Indonesian
because
diaspora.
for example, the Indonesian workers, the Indonesian women workers, which they have a lot in Singapore. When we were in Singapore,
Also in
they
Japan.
have
Also
In
Japan?
Japan also, can you say, right?
right. Yes.
Can you
uh-huh.
say, yeah, in
Okay.
Japan also.
So there's always problems, as you know,
Yeah.
with Indonesian workers
Right.
working abroad, and so we are, we have to be able to, be like a home to them. Where do they run to? They run to the embassy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's where we are to receive
That's like
them.
an
and,
additional job desk that you
Indeed,
didn't
yeah.
see coming, probably.
No. So we just adapt to whatever is
Yeah.
out there and just do the best we can.
Okay.
To be a home, that is a beautiful word. So we'll be back on Starting Point. But next up, we got the Indonesian diplomatic circle. Laili Rusat, the first female diplomat in Indonesia, demonstrated that the role of women in the Indonesian historical path could not be underestimated.
Prior to becoming the first female diplomat in Indonesia, Laili Rusad earned a bachelor degree from the Rechtshogeschool Batavia, or Jakarta Law School, in 1941. She inherited strong learning spirit from her mother and had aspired to become a judge, not a diplomat. Driven by her curiosity on the legal profession that allows a person to make decisions based on the laws he or she had learned at school. Unfortunately, her dream didn't come true as there was no place for female judges at that time as yet. Laili's career at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs began in 1949. Since 1952, she has frequently been part of the Indonesian delegation at the General Assembly of the United Nations. She has also been Deputy Indonesian Permanent Representative to the UN along with Sujarwo Chondronegoro. Prior to serving as ambassador, Laili had attended a postgraduate course on international law in London for 2 years. She was assigned as Indonesian ambassador to Belgium in 1959 to 1964 and ambassador to Austria in 1967 to 1970. Laili has even received a diplomatic service awards from the Belgian and the Luxembourg governments. During her career, Laili often attended international conferences, including those on diplomatic law, atomic power in Vienna, and negotiations on the West Iran issues.
So there you have it, the first female Indonesian diplomatic just now. And let's carry on our talks with Ibu Lona and Ibu Mira, shall we, on Starting Point. So we have talks about all the experiences, all the challenges. Now, what we want to ask you for the next session would be, can we know the daily activities as a women in diplomacy? can you like sleep for 8 hours in a day? Because we heard all the stories. It's super busy. So what do you do in a day, Ibu Lona, Ibu Mira?
Yeah, actually, like of course, like every mother, like every woman,
Yes.
usually in the morning we have to prioritize for our family.
Yes.
So husband and children prepare everything and all. And then typical day we also have activities with, like, for example, Women Association, like Ibu Mira said, International Women, or United Nations Women's Guild, for example. And we participate in the events that they hold. And then we also have to adapt to fit into the country. So like, for example, in my case, when living in Japan, in France, and in Italy, I was required to learn the languages.
The languages.
Also, so I took the language classes also. And then, of course, when there are events in the embassy, we also help to, to make sure it's successful. Usually we help with the preparation of the food, and then
Food
also
again.
the food.
Yes,
again.
food is number one.
Yeah,
Yes.
and then the decoration, but also other things, like, for example, being the parts of the event, like being the MC, or
Oh.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
and also performing, like singing, dancing. On I used to play angklung, play gamelan with the embassy team, because that's what we do. That's just what we do.
That's really good.
Yes, so it's more or less the day, and also of course, we hang out with Indonesians there, the diaspora there.
Diaspora, okay.
We have to be close with them, because they help us a lot, and also they represent Indonesia, even though they are not, for example, Indonesian nationalities anymore, but still in their daily lives, they are very close to Indonesia still. They really like to wear batik, to hold some cultural events also with their communities there, and usually we attend to, and then that's why.
Ibu Lena, so now that you have lived in, was it Osaka just now?
Osaka, Paris, and Rome.
So I'm just curious, how many languages have you been able
just
to
that.
master?
Same here.
Just those three.
There's those three.
Fluently?
Sorry?
Can you speak fluently in like Japanese and
Japanese? Actually, it was more than 20 years ago around.
20 years
Okay.
ago?
So
yeah,
that time it was still okay. Now
Okay.
I can
Yeah.
still speak a little,
Okay.
but of course not as fluent as before, because before I also took the like Nihongo no Ryoku Shiken, the like Japanese TOEFL, something like that.
Well, you're good.
But now I don't know, very long time already. But I think
What about your French and Italian?
French is actually I am required to speak because of my children. I mean, my children go to French schools until now, and usually they speak at home in French, so as not forget it. So I'm used to listening to their conversation, so French is more familiar to me. And Italian, it was a bit different, but not so difficult, because the grammar is close to French. Yeah, the Roman language. Yeah, but I can still say that I love very much learning Japanese, and especially the characters. It was very interesting to me, and even though now I cannot read
You need to
so
refresh it
fluently,
again,
but,
yes.
but if I go to Japan now, I think I wouldn't get lost. I can still understand a little bit.
Well, that's an additional perks by
Yes.
traveling
Yeah,
so
yeah,
much, living in these countries. Yeah.
Yes. How about Ibu Mira? Anything you want to add from the daily activities?
What I wanted to add from Lona's story
Yeah.
about the daily activities, what we also have is a lot of guests coming, Indonesian guests,
Yeah.
like from DPR or parliament
officials.
officials, yeah. And some bring their spouses, and so that's where we come in again.
Okay.
So we accompany them. We do a tour. We become wisata apa namanya?
Like guide.
Tour guide.
Tour guide. Okay.
In a way.
We become tour guides of that particular country. So that's an additional thing that we do. But then not only official, the Indonesian officials, but also our own guests. So when I was in Tokyo, every month I had family and friends coming who wanted to see the sakura, especially. So so it was very busy. I didn't have time to I didn't have 8 hours of sleep, I think, at that time,
Okay.
because I was out with guests all of the time.
Wow.
And so official guests, but also non-official guests, my own guests. So
Okay.
because everybody wanted to come to Tokyo at
Yeah.
the time. And lo and behold, it was COVID after that.
So you get a
then it
long break.
stopped, yeah. So-
Okay,
Yeah.
we will carry on with this dialogue just in a moment,
Yes.
but let's move on to one last story of the day. Indonesian Foreign Affairs Minister Retno Marsudi has shattered the stigma that a woman could not handle a top ministerial post and lead the male officials.
May I call the meeting to order? Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished solutions.
Currently, Minister Retno Marsudi is one of Indonesia's most influential female ministers and often becomes a speaker in national and international fora. Retno said her teenage self never dreamed of becoming a minister, especially foreign affairs minister. She saw that the position required diplomatic and political skills, the fields that were usually dominated by men. Retno said that as she is not from a well-off family, she realized that to reach her dream as a diplomat, she had to work hard to pay for tuition fee. Retno had gone through a lot of challenges, including the social expectations that were placed on women. However, Retno has been fortunate because in the Foreign Affairs Ministry, women had ample space and opportunity to step up onto the career ladder. Retno explained that her ministry did not have any special treatment for men and women, either on career or workloads. According to Retno, women could also lead diplomatic missions in both national and international levels. Reflecting on her experience, Retno hopes all ministries or institutions in Indonesia can break the stigma that top officials belong to men and will give the same opportunity to all women officials or diplomats.
The current state of our world is very worrying. The pandemic persists and global economy remains.
So, a number of female diplomats have successfully brought Indonesia to global recognition by tackling the accusation of Papua human rights at the UN General Assembly events. Now, here are the details. Nara Rahmatia. Nara shut down the allegation from the Pacific Islands state leaders on human rights condition in Papua and West Papua. Ainan Nuran slapped the representative of Vanuatu in the UN General Assembly in 2017. Rayano Sangaji retweeted that Papua has been a part of Indonesia. She alleged that the reason Vanuatu raised the issue of Papua in a UN event was not due to having concerns. And Silvani Austin Pasaribu responding to the statement of Vanuatu Prime Minister Bob Lohman. And so we're back with Ibu Lona and Ibu Mira on the starting point. Now, anything you want to add, again, about the daily activities?
Yes, what
Ibu
we
Lona?
forgot to mention is that we were talking, about our own
Like
experience
individual.
and individual
Okay.
experience, but actually we are a group of women, of spouses of diplomats, Indonesian diplomats, and we are under the umbrella of the Dharma Wanita Persatuan. So, which is in Jakarta we have it, but also in every embassy and consulate,
Mission.
every mission we have our Dharma Wanita Persatuan, where we do activities. So we do everything together. So when we have, for example, if we have a guest coming, we take turns. So no, it's not just the spouse of the ambassador who has to take care of everything, but we, all the spouses who are posted there, we take turns in taking care of the delegation as well. We take turns in cooking, for example. So one example is when we were in Singapore, because of the amount of the Indonesian workers that are there are 1,000, 4,000 who are, when it's the Lebaran,
Lebaran.
Lebaran.
Eid
Idul
Mubarak,
Fitri.
yeah. So we have to cook. So my experience there was cooking for in the thousands. So you can do like 20 kilos of meat.
Wow.
You can, yes, for example, I had a pot, that was this tall. You could probably swim in it. And so those are some of the challenges again. But we do it, you know, communally.
Okay.
We do it together, like sate. If we want to promote sate, we ladies from the Dharma Wanita Persatuan will be, you know, going to the embassy, and then we are, you know, making the sate together in groups, so that, you know, that we can work it out and prepare the things that we need to do. So that is the Dharma Wanita Persatuan, which is a very important part of diplomacy as well.
Yes.
Wow, I hear a lot of cooking during your
Warning, Luisa.
placements. What would you say to your fellow diplomats, especially those who are starting out as the wife of diplomats?
Lona.
I think the most important is you have to learn to. This was the sentence I like very much. When before we got posted during the orientation, one of the speakers said, "Learn to like what you dislike." So you have to like go with the flow, and you know, always being positive. That's very important. The positivity, and then always love to learn new things, because there are a lot to expect, a lot to, you know, having the sense of adventure. You know, without it, maybe you will be miserable because you are far from your family and relatives. You feel alone there. You don't speak the language yet, for example, and you know, everything is still strange to you. But if you have the positivity, the always want to learn new things and take everything as a form of learning, I think that's the very basic thing for me.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Ibu Lona. Ibu Mira, how about you?
Yeah, just exactly Lona's words. So be flexible, be open, be positive. Always look at the bright side.
Yes.
You know, never look at it. You know, don't be miserable. You know, always, because
no self-pity.
Yeah, no self-pity, because the energy that you bring to the others, your own family. I mean, can you imagine being, you know, you pity yourself, what happens to your children? So you always have to be on a positive high at all times, in every situation.
If I may add just a little bit about the role of spouses, like Ibu Mira said, the energy you bring to the family. Actually, there is scientific research about it, that diplomatic spouse directly impacting the diplomat's performance because of, you know, the daily
Happy
life.
Wife, happy life.
Yes.
Happy wife,
and indirectly it can give impact to the mission as well. There is actually scientific research about it. So like that.
I could not agree more. I mean, I can imagine, because you are what unites the family. You are the energy of the family. So you're not just representing your family, but representing Indonesia. That's a lot of work as the wife of a diplomat. I am in awe of all of your stories today that you shared.
So thank you for coming here this morning, sharing with us all of your great stories. And also this book, if you want to read it, it's called Di Balik Gerbang, Inspirasi dari Kisah 7 Pendamping Diplomat.
With the endorsement from the minister
herself. Yes, with endorsement from the minister herself, Retno Marsudi.
Yes. All right.
Di Balik Gerbang. Thank you, Ibu Lona, Ibu Mira. As the Japanese would say, otsukare sama deshita. Terima kasih atas kerja kerasnya.
Banzai.
Banzai. We'll be back on the starting point for more news. Stick around.